It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, live from Jerusalem, our top story. The truce extended tonight till Thursday as more Israeli hostages and soon Palestinian prisoners are set free. The United Nations warns it will still be impossible to fully aid Gaza in that time as we see some of the civilians able to escape. The sick and wounded carried to safety on a Mercy flight, the biggest so far during the humanitarian pause.
It's not any ordinary medical situation. They're having to cope with people who are seriously traumatized as well.
Also on Sky News at 10 tonight, in recovery, the relations between the government and senior doctors as their union agrees to put a new pay deal to its members. The first human case of a form of swine flu in the UK as health officials search urgently for the source. And why Christmas has come early for one Northern Irish pub, toasting the advert, which rivals the best of them. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's coming up in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight.
Good evening, live from Jerusalem. Under a quarter of the hostages taken by Hamas to Gaza have so far been freed. And tonight, Israel agreed an extension to the truce with its enemy, which should result in more captives and more Palestinian prisoners being released. The existing ceasefire had been due to end early tomorrow morning. It will now run until Thursday. Tonight, Hamas released 11 more hostages, with the Red Cross bringing them out of Gaza. It brings the total number of Israeli hostages released by Hamas to 51 since the truce was agreed. The Israeli government says 18 others have also been freed. That total, though, is still a minority, as Hamas still holds an estimated 173 hostages in Gaza. Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle reports on tonight's developments.
For 4 days, Gaza has remained tense but calm as the ceasefire has held. And then, hours before the truce was due to expire, news came through of an extension.
Our hostages are not lost. We won't sit around and hope they're found. We will rescue our hostages at all costs. It is our duty, it is our moral responsibility of the Israeli Defense Forces.
Israel and Hamas have agreed to continue the temporary ceasefire for a further 2 days after significant international pressure.
Humanitarian pause has already brought a halt to the fighting, together with a surge of humanitarian assistance. Now, in order to extend the pause, Hamas has committed to releasing another 20 women and children over the next 2 days. We would, of course, hope to see the pause extended further, and that will depend upon Hamas continuing to release hostages.
The Palestinian Authority has already said that it wants the ceasefire to be extended further.
La tregua paró.
The truce went into effect with 15,000 deaths. If we see the war resume tomorrow, then the number of deaths will double because the concentration of the Palestinian population is now twofold.
Tonight, another 11 Israeli hostages were released. 2 mothers and 9 children, as well as 33 Palestinian prisoners as part of the agreement. The extension will bring hope to many families still waiting for news of their relatives, like Inbal Zak. 3 of her family were killed on October the 7th, and her cousin Tal Soham is still being held hostage. Tal's wife and 2 children and mother-in-law were released on Saturday.
The world needs to know that there is kids right now that miss their father. Can you look in his eyes and then to look in the young kid eyes and to explain where is daddy? Why he can't play with her and why he can't put her to bed after the shower? Why he can't give her food or just a hug? I'm just asking people around the world to know that the family is not complete.
Today, another released hostage, 78-year-old Margalit Moses, left hospital. With the truce extended, there will be more scenes like this in the coming days. but Hamas has captured many IDF soldiers. It is hard to see them being released without some major concessions from Israel.
And Alistair joins me now. And Ali, we saw those images of the hostages being brought into Israel. All eyes now on Offa prison in the West Bank, where we're expecting Palestinian prisoners to be released from.
Yeah, 33 Palestinian prisoners released as part of this deal. That normally happens a couple of hours after the Israeli hostages have crossed into Israeli territory. It is part of the deal. It is a deal that the two sides have kept for the most part over the last 4 days. There's been a few little hiccups during it. But what we tend to see in the West Bank is big celebrations that take place when the Palestinians are released, celebrations that the Israelis have tried to stop, but the Palestinians have ignored that, and it can end up in some tear gas being fired, sometimes live shots being fired as well. But significantly, what we see when the Palestinian prisoners are released are the waving of the green Hamas flags, which are banned in the West Bank. But Hamas, which does not have, or has traditionally not had a big foothold in the West Bank, has seen an awful lot of political credit because of these releases. And that is very significant, particularly in the long term. Hamas will be aware of that they are taking the credit for these Palestinian prisoners being released. It is giving them huge political credibility in the West Bank over their rivals Fatah, and that will worry a lot of people, most notably the Israelis.
Indeed, and it's actually past midnight. We've actually seen them released a little bit earlier in the day, so we'll have to see how this develops and evolves. Now, while the 2-day extension of the humanitarian truce has been widely welcomed, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has warned it's not enough time to meet the aid needs in Gaza. Over the past weeks, we have highlighted the desperate situation in Gaza's hospitals. And one of those who has worked in them, a British Palestinian surgeon, said today he took little comfort from the humanitarian pause. Our international correspondent John Sparks spoke to him.
There are only a handful of hospitals and clinics left on the Gaza Strip, and those that remain cannot cope with the number of patients and the severity of their injuries. Many are simply turned away. It's a desperate situation that surgeon Hassan Abu Sita knows well. He spent 40 days in northern Gaza performing hundreds of emergency procedures on little or no sleep, an experience he describes as apocalyptic.
Most of the injuries initially were blast injuries, and these were severe soft tissue traumas, severe facial traumas, multiple fractures, and then as time went, we saw the introduction of incendiary bombs where the patients would have over 40% of their total body surface area burnt with no other injuries.
Abu Sita provided a pivotal voice from the medical front line, working at Al-Shifa Hospital, the territory's largest, until it ran out of supplies.
How do you evacuate 1,700 critically injured patients, 150 ventilated patients?
Back in London, he told journalists the Israelis will use the ceasefire to their military advantage, adding there are things in Gaza he can't get out of his mind.
By the time Shifa had been completely surrounded by the Israelis, there were 120 children at Shifa Hospital who were wounded children with no surviving families. Some of whom were too young for us to even know their names.
You said that often it was the little things, the small things that were difficult to deal with.
Suddenly, you are hit with the life that was before, and it's the braid and the hairband and the
Dr. Abu Sita spoke for the medics, the injured and the bereaved. a voice from a territory that's become uninhabitable, he says. John Sparks, Sky News.
Difficult scenes there in Gaza, and we saw some of the people there in John's report, some of those in hospital in Gaza. Others, though, have been fortunate enough to be rescued in the biggest mercy mission of the truce so far. Now, around 200 severely ill patients and their families departed from El Arish airport close to the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt. They flew to Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates on the largest emergency airlift organised so far. Sky News was the only foreign news organisation allowed on the flight. Our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, made the journey with them.
The medical teams turned the plane into a flying hospital as they flew into the Gaza border to rescue the wounded and sick.
Attaching monitor is on.
This was to be one of the largest mercy missions attempted so far during this pause. No minute was wasted as the medics went through their emergency drills, readying for the worst and preparing for everything. On the ground in Gaza, our Sky crew was with some of the critically wounded, hoping to get on the flight to safety. The crying is his mother, one of thousands struggling, bolstered only by their relatives' reassurances. Getting any treatment here is tough. The health system has utterly collapsed, so the only chance of life is getting out. Most of the injuries are from buildings which have collapsed after bombing. Many of those who are pulled from the rubble, like Yusuf, are left with bodies horribly crushed and burned. His father, Wessam, tells him they're taking him out of Gaza to get help. "Be strong, my son," he says. "Who will I go with?" Yusuf asks him. "I will," his father says. He's making promises which are very hard to keep. Leaving Gaza is virtually impossible. Even when critically hurt, the patients need security clearance by Israel and Egypt, and a country willing to take them in. The Emirati rescue plane spent 7 hours parked up in Egypt waiting for security passes. It was dark with flying time running out when the cargo of patients and companions arrived at Arish airport from the Gaza border. And this had to be done slowly and carefully. All of the patients are desperately ill, the bulk of them cancer sufferers needing urgent treatment they can't get in Gaza. They were all very dehydrated, hungry, scared and hurting.
The amputations are a catastrophe. Leg and thigh amputations, especially babies. I saw a 3-month-old with both legs amputated. I saw a girl with her arm amputated. It's a catastrophe. This war is a catastrophe.
For most, it was a huge relief to be on the flight. Among them, a girl of about 10 years old with a serious head injury. She's been waiting for a while to be airlifted out. Another who'd had to have her leg amputated.
There is so much to think of here because it's not any ordinary medical situation. They're having to cope with people who were seriously traumatized as well.
Traumatized and wrung out with emotion, as well as a growing sense of frustration with the inaction by the outside world.
No food, no electricity, no internet, no water. Gaza Strip is complained. Where is the war? What is it?
And so many of the war-wounded are still inside Gaza, thousands waiting for someone to rescue them. The organisers had little say in who got a ticket to hope. They had one aim.
Phase one really is saving their lives. Almost everyone on this plane who's a patient would have died had they not been offered the treatment we're about to offer them. This is the urgency of it.
They have a chance now, but they've left relatives and everything they ever loved behind them. And surviving's twin sister is often called guilt. They took more than 24 hours to get here, but with an extended truce also comes extra hope of more airlifts for the badly wounded and sick. Alex Crawford, Sky News in Abu Dhabi.
So this extended truce means respite for so many Gazans. It means more hostages will be released, and it means more Palestinian prisoners will also be freed. We'll be following and watching all the developments here from Jerusalem. But for now, back to you in London, Anna.
Yalda, thank you. Rishi Sunak only appointed a new health secretary a fortnight ago, and after months of stalemate with doctors, Victoria Atkins seemed to have had more freedom than her predecessor to make a deal. Consultants have been offered an additional uplift on top of their existing offer and have agreed to vote on it. Our political correspondent Amanda Akas reports.
As the NHS braces for its busiest time of year, hopes that an injection of cash for consultants and a package of reform will bring an end to strikes by senior doctors. It's a big announcement for the new health secretary, just 2 weeks into the job.
This is a really good reform of a pay contract for consultants that has been around for some 20 years, that will mean that it is faster, simpler and fairer for consultants, but also critically for patients. And so I really hope that consultants feel able to accept this offer.
The consultants are already getting a 6% pay rise this year, but the new offer would see an extra 4.95% put into their overall pay pot from January. Under the new structure, some bands will be unaffected, but most receive a significant boost, with some getting over £13,000.
We've had huge pay cuts in real terms over the last 10, 15 years or so. And what this pay offer attempts to do is to try and redress that. It's going to include some reform to the pay review body, which has let us down over the last 10 or 15 years by allowing that pay erosion to happen.
Announcing a series of public sector pay deals this summer, Rishi Sunak insisted all offers were final and striking would make no difference. But with consultants walking out as well as junior doctors, NHS waiting lists have hit record levels, despite the Prime Minister's promise to bring them down. That's politically embarrassing, and now the government's really been forced into a softening of approach.
We can't take it anymore.
There's no deal yet for the junior doctors who've been striking since March, but with the combined walkouts leading to more than 1 million rescheduled appointments, patients largely welcome today's news.
They should feel valued, they should be well paid, as well as creating good working conditions.
They should be better remunerated. They work incredibly hard and they're brilliant people.
I think they get enough and they shouldn't be pushing for more. Maybe the nurses, yes, but certainly not the consultants, because they do a lot of private work anyway.
The Royal College of Nursing say they're appalled by the deal when their members have had the lowest pay rise in the public sector. The consultants' vote will be done by mid-January. If they reject the deal, further strikes could be on the cards. Amanda Akas, Sky News.
Well, the Prime Minister may have moved to ease one headache today with that offer to senior doctors, but tonight he's involved in what seems to be a diplomatic spat with the Greek Prime Minister. A spokesperson for Kyriakos Mitsotakis saying his boss is disappointed that a meeting with Rishi Sunak has been cancelled at the 11th hour. Well, our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, is in Downing Street tonight. Some ancient history, Sam, causing this modern row.
That's right, Anna. The turmoil began this afternoon when Downing Street announced they were sending Oliver Dowden, the Deputy Prime Minister, rather than Rishi Sunak, to meet the Greek Prime Minister tomorrow. The reason seems to be the negotiation that appears to be taking place in public over the Elgin marbles, those Greek antiquities that are in the British Museum. Now, from the British side, this looks like it's being pushed by another former Conservative in the form of George Osborne, the ex-Chancellor who used to inhabit number 11 behind me. He's suggesting perhaps there could be some form of loan of the marbles or parts of the marbles to Greece that might get round the myriad of laws that keep them, insist on them staying in this country. But Downing Street look like they're very against that plan. There is some talk, I'm told, that inside government there were discussions about perhaps even banning export licences to stop the marbles leaving the country. There is incendiary anger in some Tory circles about George Osborne himself. Some people think that because he is pushing a position that is not apparently backed by Downing Street, his position is untenable and he, George Osborne, should resign as chairman of the British Museum. Things are complicated because Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, seems, according to some reports, to be open to it, although the reality is slightly less clear since Number 10 haven't completely ruled out loaning the marbles. But the anger is clear. What is evident is that all sides seem willing on this issue of the Elgin marbles to have a cultural war. Everyone's participating tonight. Let's see what happens tomorrow.
Sam, in Downing Street, we will indeed. Thank you. Health officials are investigating the UK's first human case of a new strain of swine flu. The person who caught it in North Yorkshire has recovered, but as they didn't work with pigs, the source is unknown and now under investigation. Our science correspondent Thomas Moore has this assessment of the risk.
Every time a virus jumps from animals into humans, there is a shudder of alarm. This time, it's over a strain of flu called H1N2, and it seems to have originated in pigs. The human case was detected through routine screening in North Yorkshire. The individual only had mild symptoms, and they made a full recovery. But how they came to be infected is a mystery. The strain is similar to a virus circulating in pigs in the UK, yet the individual doesn't work with the animals, and the UK Health Security Agency is now scrambling to trace contacts to establish whether the virus is spreading below the radar.
There may have been some limited transmission between people, but that is different from a situation of more widespread transmission among people. As part of our investigations, we are increasing our surveillance efforts just to understand exactly if there has been any transmission.
In 2009, there was a pandemic of swine flu caused by another virus called H1N1. The infection was relatively mild, though still caused 457 deaths in the UK. But there are flu strains in other animals that scientists are on high alert for. Top of the list at the moment is H5N1, or bird flu. That's caused 878 cases worldwide since 2003, and more than half have died. A nasty virus with significant pandemic potential. There's no evidence that the Yorkshire strain of swine flu is in the same league. Animal viruses have to adapt to human cells before they can spread easily between people. But UK authorities have notified the World Health Organization, and scientists will be trying to understand just how much a risk there is from this new virus.
Thomas Moore there. Now, the nurse who provided first aid to one of the children who was stabbed in Dublin last Thursday has told Sky News that he was left in complete shock and has not left the house in days. Riots broke out in the Irish capital after 3 children and a school worker were stabbed outside a nursery.
I saw this little girl. She was like wearing a blue jacket and pink bag. She was like running, and then slowly everything just stopped. She collapsed on the floor. In the hospital, it's a controlled environment. We know what to do. But in that situation, it's different. And it was a child. All the time when I was doing the CPR there, I was just like thinking repeatedly, please give me a reaction.
The widow of a serial killer is set to go on trial tomorrow on murder charges over the death of a British student 33 years ago. If convicted, Monique Olivier will be the first person held accountable for Joanna Parish's death, despite her husband admitting 5 years ago that he killed her. Sky's Europe correspondent Adam Parsons sat down with Joanna's parents.
Joanna Parish was just 20 years old, a university student working in the French town of Auxerre as part of her degree course. She was lively and friendly, and then she went missing. Her body later found in the River Yonne. She had been raped and murdered.
That was what we called the chocolate box picture, and she hated it.
Decades later, the sense of loss still haunts her parents.
At the age of 20, she was full of fun. She was very, very friendly to everybody, very kind to everybody. She just enjoyed life.
Well, more than anybody else I've known, really. Jo so much deserved a long and a happy and a fulfilled life, you know, because, as I said, she worked hard. She so much deserved it.
Nobody has been convicted of Joanna's murder, but it's certain that this man killed her. Michel Fourneret, a serial killer, imprisoned 15 years ago. He later confessed to murdering Joanna, but died before he could be tried. But Fourneret didn't act alone. His wife, Monique Olivier, helped him kill again and again. She's already in prison, but will finally now be prosecuted for Joanna's death. For her parents, it's been a tortuous wait for any form of justice.
It's a long time. It's over 30 years. We've been wanting to happen, obviously, so we're glad it's taking place.
What is striking is that Monique Olivier, a wife and mother, repeatedly lured women and girls to their deaths.
It's just such a horrible, horrible thing. I can't imagine any mother would be able to live with themselves like that.
Joanna is buried here, in the village where she grew up, where her family still lives, her grave written in English and French. Hers is a story of justice denied and delayed, but finally it may be coming. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Gloucestershire.
Now, it cost £700, but seems to more than rival competitors, which may have cost £1 million. The Christmas advert for a Northern Irish pub, which one of the experts behind John Lewis's campaigns told us today is great. Its star said he's just enjoying the spotlight, and it's unbelievable how it's snowballed. Our arts and entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer, has more.
God knows what is hiding in those weak and drunken hearts.
It is the 2-minute amateur Christmas ad paid for by a Northern Ireland pub that's had social media users in floods. Sweet elderly widower with nobody to talk to, tick. A song that tugs at the heartstrings, tick. And an uplifting payoff, big tick. Amateur actor Martin McManus currently experiencing what it's like to go viral.
It feels pretty good, pretty good. It's going to be hard to come back down, you know, that's the problem. I'm just enjoying it. I enjoy drama. I've been at it for years and years, and it's great to get success like this. It's unbelievable, actually, the way it has snowballed, you know.
Pub manager Una Burns had the ambitious idea, finding £700 for the shoot.
Never in our wildest dreams did we expect this reaction. It's just what I've seen in the pub over the years, and I suppose I really wanted to get across that message that it's not always a joyful, happy time for everybody, and that some people find it really tough, and just to be kind, and maybe a smile or a simple hello will go a long way.
We're not crying, you are, was the response from John Lewis on TikTok. And there might well be tears, seen by many as the masters of the Christmas ad. While the retailer hasn't said what it cost making its festive Venus flytrap this year, in the past it's thought to have spent around £1 million on its Yuletide commercials.
It's great.
Chief Creative Officer at Adam and Eve, Richard Brim, helped make adverts for John Lewis for 14 years.
It starts from telling an emotional story around Christmas and trying to get people to get them in the fields. There's proven data to show if you sell the notion of Christmas and how people feel and happiness and togetherness and joy, it doesn't necessarily have to be the product of the year.
The viral response to one pub's festive foray into advertising, perhaps proving that during a cost of living crisis, retailers can stuff their big budgets as well as our turkeys. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview tonight, joined by the Guardian's political editor, Pippa Crerar, and the Sun's chief political correspondent, Jack Elson. Welcome to both of you. Among the stories we will be discussing, this on the front of the Guardian, their headline: a deal to extend truce raises hope of dozens more hostages to be released. Back with that and plenty more after this. Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, our top stories. The humanitarian truce between Israel and Hamas has been extended by 2 days as 11 more Israeli hostages are released tonight. Back here, the government and doctors' unions agreed to put a pay offer to consultant doctors, which could end a long-running strike action in England. And health officials are investigating the UK's first human case of a new strain of swine flu. The person who caught it in North Yorkshire has recovered. Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look then at what is on the front pages. Time to see what's making the headlines with The Guardian's political editor, Pippa Crerar, and The Sun's chief political correspondent, Jack Elson. Welcome to both of you, with us from now until just before midnight. So as ever, let's check out the front pages, starting with The Guardian. It leads with Hamas releasing more hostages. Its headline, deal to extend the truce, raises hopes of dozens more hostages being released. Front page of The Eye, according to economists, interest rates will stay high into 2025. And the Financial Times reports that NATO allies are finding their patience tested by Turkey's continued willingness to export goods to Russia, which are vital to the Kremlin's ongoing war against Ukraine. According to the Metro, a court has heard that the people accused of killing the transgender teenager Brianna Ghey were preoccupied with torture, violence and death. And the Mirror reports on David Walliams settling a bitter legal fight with Britain's Got Talent over his leaked X-rated jibes. A shake-up could be on the way for football, with The Sun reporting the VAR could be extended to checking corners, free kicks and yellow cards. While the Daily Mail's report on a new book on the Royals, which has been branded vicious and plain nasty, makes their front page with the headline, Poisonous. Well, a reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. We'll watch us and listen to our guests. Let's head to Pippa and Jack. Welcome to both of you. And still, once again, news from Gaza, the release of hostages and indeed Palestinian prisoners making the front pages, including this deal for this extension, which many people had hoped for, Pippa.
Yes, I mean, the original deal for this pause, this ceasefire, was for 4 days, so that there could be an exchange of those people that had been kidnapped, the hostages, Israeli hostages held in Gaza, and also the release of prisoners mostly from the West Bank, but from Israeli prisons, Palestinian prisoners, many of them women and children, teenage boys and women. There's been a sort of a frantic dash at the last minute to try and extend this 4-day ceasefire so that more hostages can be released, with just a few hours really remaining until that time was up. The mediators have managed to agree on this extension by 48 hours. Again, the Qataris have proved pivotal in securing that extension. And the good news is that it means that more Israeli hostages, I think 10 a day, are likely to be released. And tonight we've seen yet more really kind of heartrending stories of some of those that have been returned to their families that were kidnapped on October the 7th.
Including a mother and her twin 3-year-olds as well.
Yeah, and like everybody, I've been following particular stories of particular Israelis who have been appealing very publicly often for the return of their children, and some of those were reunited with their children today. So that has been really, really difficult, obviously, for them. And so it's very heartwarming to see that some of these people have been reunited. Of course, the situation in Palestine as well, in Gaza as well, my paper, The Guardian, reports that Hamas had actually sought a 4-day extension, not a 48-hour one, because, of course, it has been pounded, Gaza, and there are tens of, I think the latest figures from the Hamas-run health ministry is between 13,000 and 15,000 Palestinians killed, many of them, of course, women and children as well. And, this just, again, I think shows what a human tragedy this whole thing is.
And it's all about children tonight, really. In terms of the Israelis who've been freed, only 3 are adults. One of them is an 18-year-old, so, barely an adult. The 2 other adults are mothers of their children. And on the Palestinian side, 33 are being released. Once again, only 3 are women. The rest are minors, as they call them. We've got got some pictures, actually, of the Offa prison. As you can see, the flashing lights, they were expecting the release there to head back into the West Bank. Again, it's a delay from the Israeli hostages. We've had pictures very recently of them arriving at a medical centre in Tel Aviv as well. So once again, following the pattern where they are checked to see how they are, to begin meeting their families once again, who've waited so patiently 52 days, with such fear for, their lives, and this extraordinary moment for them of allowing their people back. But, still, I think the estimate is 173 that still remain hostage. And what happens now is absolutely critical, isn't it? And how the 2 days follow. And then, once again, Jack, what happens after that?
Completely. And I don't think anyone would not be moved by the footage which we have seen of children literally running into the arms of their parents after almost 2 months with Hamas terrorists in Gaza. Now, obviously, these pictures and images have put incredible pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu to extend this ceasefire, not just from within Israel, but also internationally as well. And we've seen the UN and Joe Biden come out tonight and really welcome this extension to the truce. However, make no mistake, Israel have been very clear that this is just that, a temporary ceasefire. And we've seen today senior figures from the IDF and senior figures in the Israeli government saying, do not think for 1 second that we are relenting in any way of our determination to crush Hamas. And Benjamin Netanyahu came out very quickly out of the blocks after October 7th and said that this war will end with the end of Hamas. And so at the moment, he's really straddling this divide between trying to go after Hamas and root them out of Gaza, but also we have the hostages here. And every time we get more hostages released, there comes another groundswell of let's extend this ceasefire, because nobody wants these, especially children, to be remained with Hamas.
But who holds them? That's the point, isn't it? I mean, this is the really critical bit. And I think the Telegraph, which we're still waiting for, talks about the fact that Hamas has lost control of the youngest hostage, taken at 9 months, now 10 months old, been taken to Khan Yunis by another group. How they track that down and whether this 2 days will allow them to find these people.
Well, it makes communications very hard in the first place. And then it raises the question of whether actually it's going to be possible to get these people back. And there was actually an interview, you mentioned the Telegraph, but the FT had done an interview with Qatar's Prime Minister, Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani, and he said that he thought about 40 women and children were held, being detained in Gaza, but not by Hamas, by other groups. And then, then that sort of raises the question about the power play between those groups and whether they are going to be as willing to negotiate with the Israelis or indeed internally with Hamas. It just adds another layer of complexity to what is already an incredibly complicated situation.
And meantime, more visitors, more kibbutz to be seen. Elon Musk in the Financial Times, alongside the Israeli Prime Minister there, as you can see. The paper suggesting he's been criticised on his social media platform X over anti-Semitism. He'd argue free speech, I suppose, or whatever. But, what's the significance of Elon Musk going there?
Completely. And we saw lots of companies actually boycott then Twitter, now X, in the wake of these comments. And I think that maybe Elon Musk would deny this, but it seems to be sort of a tour and an effort into rebuilding his international reputation here. I mean, here he is with the Israeli Prime Minister currently fighting a war against Hamas, and I think that he would want to, try and re-solidify his reputation after these comments.
Yeah, the danger of liking something that people criticise, certainly. Let's move on to economic matters back here. Front page of the Eye. Interest rates will stay high into 2025. What's the latest, Pippa?
Yeah, so this is on the back of an interview that Andrew Bailey did, in which he suggested that the outlook for the economy is the worst that he had ever seen, despite all the sort of promises from the government that things are, I think Jeremy Hunt, the words he used were, we turned a corner. And that things were looking a bit more optimistic. And the economists that the Eye has interviewed suggesting that his comments are actually a sign that interest rates may need to stay at the current rate of 5.25% until the beginning of 2025. Now, that timing is really significant because we're expecting a general election next year. I mean, the latest they could go is January 2025. I don't think anybody expects them to go that long. But the key point is that Rishi Sunak wants to be able to convince people that the economic grassroots of recovery is starting and that he is responsible for it and therefore they need to stick with him come the election. That gets increasingly hard if every month, when you have hundreds of thousands of people coming off fixed rate mortgage rates, they find themselves on a higher rate. And there has been this link made Some say it's been overstated, but regardless, between Liz Truss's mini budget and soaring interest rates and mortgage rates, this mortgage premium, this Tory premium that Labour have attacked them on, that in the public's mind is there, and the more people that come off their mortgages, these are often key voters choosing between Labour and the Tories potentially at the next election, find themselves still hammered by it, or even more hammered by a higher rate, then, that inevitably will have an influence on how they end up voting at the general election.
Yes, indeed. It's the Bank of England that sets interest rates, so isn't that, I suppose? That's the critical thing. But can the government do anything to bring inflation down, which would then trigger interest rates to fall? But the whole point is the sunny uplands is what you need to promise as a government. And if you can't deliver that in what looks like a flatlining economy next year, that certainly makes the political picture look more difficult, doesn't it, Jack?
Completely. And Andrew Bailey has made this warning just days after a very boosterish autumn statement from Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak, in which they hailed tax cuts and said that the economy is going to be growing in the next few years. Andrew Bailey, with his interview today, has taken a bucket of cold water over that and has said, well, hang on a minute, because for the millions of homeowners over there, they're still going to be on massive fixed-rate mortgages and with crippling interest rates. And as Pip has said, this doesn't only sort of deal a bit of a dent to Rishi Sunak's credentials as a bit of an economic boffin and someone who sort of can really sort of navigate the economy in tough times, but also it's very, very personal to lots of constituents because they can feel that in their pay packets every month. They see it in their mortgage going up. Mm-hmm. And as Pippa also said, these homeowners, the Middle Englanders often, who Rishi Sunak is going to be crucially trying to get on board the next election, they're going to be looking at this and going, well, hang on a minute, I thought you said that you were going to make my pay packet go up at the end of the month, not down. And, he's not going to be, Rishi Sunak's not going to be too pleased with these headlines today.
Yeah, I suppose we need to remember only, and I say only, a third of householders actually have a mortgage, which is partly why interest rates need to stay high for so long, because it has a slower impact, I guess, doesn't it, in some respects? But the other issue is whether we sense austerity again, which is the other prospect of money not being pumped into public services, when, as we've seen for example, waiting lists in the NHS, some people may now feel is necessary.
Yeah, and we're not only in a position where we've got one of the highest tax takes on record, but as well as people paying out more, but personal taxes as well as obviously business taxes, they're not getting the public services that they feel that they deserve for the money that's going in. And it's a real problem because I think it feeds into, or has for some time now, this is not a new phenomenon, it feeds into this sense that, Britain isn't working, the public services aren't working, you can't get a train that runs on time, you can't get a GP's appointment, your kid's school doesn't have enough teachers, it's got a hole in the roof. People, very, very many people have this very sort of direct experience. Rack in the roof. Oh, God, yeah, absolutely. People have this very direct experience of the public services that they expect to at least to kind of function on a basic level, not functioning. And that is obviously not just Rishi Sunak's economic promises he's made. There's promises on getting waiting lists down, on migration, we haven't even started on that. And it looks difficult for them. I mean, every time they try and close that gap with Labour in that polls, that 20-point gap, they don't manage to do it. And the autumn statement is just the latest example of a moment that they hoped would be a big reset, and it just hasn't happened yet.
To be fair, it's going to be pretty difficult for whoever wins the election as well, isn't it, really? Stay there, Pippa, Jack, thank you for the moment. Lots more still to come, including at the COVID inquiry. It's claimed that Matt Hancock imposed the lockdown tier system knowing that it wouldn't work. Back in just a moment.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me now, Pippa Crerar and Jack Elson. Welcome back to both of you. And Jack, you talk us through the COVID inquiry at the time of the mayors, one of whom suggested that they went into the tier system knowing that it wouldn't work.
Yeah, so the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, who you know is a fierce proponent for his region, has dunked on Matt Hancock at today's COVID inquiry. It seems to be sort of par for the course for witnesses throughout this probe. And he has said that Matt Hancock essentially went into the tier system knowing that it wouldn't work. So in the autumn of 2020, we had that very weird scenario where different parts of the country were subject to different rules based on how infectious they were. And Andy Burnham, pulling up Matt Hancock's evidence to the inquiry, and we haven't seen Matt Hancock actually appear yet, but this is written evidence which he has given to the statutory inquiry, has said that he went in there knowing that this wouldn't work. And I think the quote is Matt Hancock saying, "I was in despair that we had announced the policy that we knew would not work." And I think this just adds in the minds of people who suffered with these restrictions for so long that the politicians at the top really weren't properly thinking them through, or if they were, there were splits within the government themselves about what would work and what would not. And I think that Andy Burnham, obviously, he's a Labour mayor and this was a Tory government, but I think that many people will look at this and think that he was right to be pretty aggrieved.
Yeah, and obviously he always complained that there wasn't enough money to come with Tier 3, for example. They also both said that we should have been included in COBRA. You know, in a sense, there should have been a more unified approach to it and that lives would have been saved if they had. But the evidence was there about how dangerous this was from January. If you looked, you know, late-night social media scrolling, as some of us did, watching people collapse in the street in China. But nonetheless, do you think there should have been a fundamentally different approach, well, they weren't including people?
They weren't given privy to this information primarily because, as Jack says, they were Labour mayors. So it was Andy Burnham, it was Sadiq Khan in London, it was Steve Rotherham in Liverpool City region. And Steve Rotherham told the Inquirer today that he needed 24-hour police protection after he was basically told by Downing Street that the area, or I think it was by the department, that his region was going to go into Tier 3 in autumn 23 without any notification. Then he had to try and pick up the pieces and obviously got a lot of abuse as a local leader from local people. Andy Burnham talks about how referred to minutes of a government meeting where a punishment meeting, quotes, was for Greater Manchester was discussed. And the suggestion was that because Lancashire, the local council leaders in Lancashire had behaved themselves, not pushed for more money, did what they were told to do. They were predominantly at that point, or many of them were run by Tory councils. Because they had behaved themselves, shown a greater willingness to cooperate, is what the extract suggested, that they should escape the toughest measures and instead they should be imposed on Manchester. So it feels that not only were local leaders given not much time to implement the changes and to oversee them, and then obviously had to absorb the frustration of many local people, but also they were almost being played off against each other depending on how they behaved. And, you know, stress that this is 3 Labour mayors appearing at the inquiry. It was a Tory government. It got very political. But nevertheless, people elect local leaders to represent them. They would probably, I'm sure, were doing the best that they thought that they could for their regions, and they've struggled with getting the information that they needed in time.
Yeah, it continues to be very interesting, doesn't it? Certainly. To the Daily Mail and then the Sun as well. Just quickly to the Daily Mail then. This new book, Obid Scobie, The Heir and the Spare Issues, described as poisonous by the Mail, who are truly fascinated, it has to be said, by everything to do with Prince Harry still.
Completely, and, you know, this sort of rift again seems to have come at the worst time for the royal family, because we were told that actually relations between Harry and the palace had sort of, you know, thawed a bit, and that they were sort of getting on. There was a phone call between Harry and Charles. It was quite nice, you know, father-son talking again. On his birthday. And now this book seems to have completely blown that out of the water. And what we have is a drive-by, essentially, on the royal family. Now, we know that Omid Scobie has written this book. He is the Sussex's favoured authors. And so he is saying, you know, all sorts of things. And now it seems that sources who have spoken to the Mail have hit back at Omid Scobie's book tonight, which is going to be released, I think, in the coming weeks. And, you know, what it is, again, is a very, very almost sad case of a family in crisis, a family not speaking, and we're seeing it once again played out in the newspapers and in this new book.
I'm going to stop you only because I know you want to do the front page of The Sun, which is, in 30 seconds, VAR being extended horror.
Well, football fans are going to go absolutely bananas if this comes in. VAR could be extended to checking corners, yellow cards and free kicks, which could mean that a game could go on for more than 2 hours. And, you know, this has really killed the game in recent years, hasn't it? People are up in arms about VAR, and hopefully this meeting tomorrow, the FA are going to kick it into the long grass.
Yeah, what he said.
I'll ask Pippa about that next time, shall I? Pippa, Jack, thank you both very much indeed. We will see you throughout the 11 as well. Thank you very much. Here's the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, it's certainly looking cold all week with overnight frost, fog and a risk of snow and ice. So a mostly sunny but cold start tomorrow with some freezing fog patches and an extensive frost, mainly over northern and some central parts. Most places dry, a few showers around, wintry on northern hills. The morning will stay quite sunny for most of us. Early fog will linger in places, mainly dry with some mostly coastal showers around, concentrated in the northeast. Expect some snow on the hills there. It'll be cold generally. Near freezing where fog lingers, but mainly light winds mean it won't feel too cold in the sunshine.